So Laura, I'll let you, Laura,
sorry.
I'll let you mostly take the lead because this is your show, but you just, you know, point to me when you have a question, or I can add in something when there's a gap or something.
Perfect. Okay, well, hello everybody, welcome. If you're tuning in later from home, welcome to you as well. We're so happy to be cooking together today. Today we have Christina from Bridges here. Christina is a registered dietitian and she's here to help us understand a little bit more about the nutritional content in this great recipe. She'll help us talk about substitutions maybe, and answer any questions that we might have. I have a couple saved up for you, Christina. So there will be some. Today we are going to be making crispy tofu and broccoli with sesame peanut pesto. This is a recipe from Smitten Kitchen Every Day. There is a web version that I will put in the chat box for anyone who wants to follow along. I do own this cookbook, but we have it at the library as well. Excuse me. It's one of my favorite cookbooks. It's got a really nice variety of recipes, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, great baking recipes, great savory recipes. This lady does it all. She's just wonderful. And so here's what we're going to be making today. Here's a preview. So we're going to roast the tofu and broccoli, and then we're going to make a pesto to go on top. So a pesto is like a very thick, chunky sauce. Traditionally, it's made, I think, with parsley and pine nuts, but this is a very non-traditional pesto, and it is made with sesame seeds and peanuts. So I'm going to go through our ingredient list really quickly, just so you have time to gather everything up if you're cooking along at home. So first thing first is tofu. I have extra firm tofu here. You could probably get away with using medium as well. I think soft tofu would be a little bit challenging to roast, but I think that would be a great question for Christina once we're through the ingredients of ways we can use soft tofu as well. So we also have broccoli. I have safflower oil, just in any neutral cooking oils, great here. I have salt and pepper in front of me. I have soy sauce. The recipe also calls for cornstarch. I didn't have cornstarch at home today, so we are just going to skip it. If you have it, it's going to add an extra crispiness to the tofu. It's very delicious. I just didn't have any on hand. What else have we got here? Sesame seeds. I have a big bag from Bulk Barn. I have peanuts. These are the main ingredients for our pesto. I also have fresh ginger. I'm missing garlic, but if you have garlic at home, it calls for 1 garlic clove. Then we also have ingredients these are things I buy about once a year, but I usually have them on hand and they're very useful. So I have rice vinegar and sesame oil. So I find with these ingredients, a little bit goes a long way. Like I said, I don't buy them very often, but when I use them, they really do make a big impact compared to other oils and vinegars. If you don't have sesame oil or rice vinegar, let us know and we can suggest some substitutions instead. The recipe also calls for brown sugar, my very attractive package of sugar here, and scallions to finish. I'm going to omit the scallions today because, again, I don't have them. And the spirit of these classes is all about using up what we have on hand. So the first thing I am going to do is press my tofu. So I really like this brand because it doesn't come packed in a ton of water. I had tofu in the fridge, actually, that was soft tofu. If anyone's not familiar, it usually comes more in a carton and it's in a lot more liquid. I don't know. I'm not sure why one comes in more liquid than the other, but I do find this one a little easier to work with. I am going to open this up over the sink. And Christina, so my first question for you is, so soft tofu is not appropriate, not appropriate, but it would be very difficult to roast the way we're going to do today. What kind of recipes would you recommend for soft tofu?
Yeah, so for using for soft too, I think it's often referred to sort of as a dessert tofu. So it can be added to smoothies. And actually, when I come to think about it, that's the only thing that I think I've ever added it in. I'm sure that it could be probably blended into a soup. But yeah, that's the only thing that I can think of. So it's often blended. I may have to look up to see what else it could be used as. But certainly like the firm and extra firm would be good in this case. And sometimes like you're going to chop it today. In some cases, firm tofu might be crumbled. Like I've seen it crumbled into, into stir fries as well, but also chili. So it's got like a ground texture. Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's okay. No, I'm going to see if, because I was like, I'm ready to answer that question. And then I realized, well, that's actually the only answer I know. Smoothies.
Smoothies is a great answer. The idea of blending it makes me wonder, I've never done this, but I've always been interested in making vegan cheeses. So I wonder if, I'm sure there's recipes that use it. And then you also mentioned soup. So the only time I think I've ever probably eaten soft tofu is like in a miso soup.
Yeah.
It's very small. Okay, I just need a plate. I'm going to grab that.
So I just checked online. It says smoothies, desserts, puddings, salad dressing, sauces, and dips. Actually, I have used it in a dip. I forgot about that.
Okay, it's almost more like a thickener.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, very good to know. Okay, so I have a little plate here. I have some paper towels. We are using firm tofu and we're going to press it. The recipe calls for it to be pressed for 10 to 30 minutes. So we'll probably be closer to 10. Like I said, I use this brand of tofu pretty often. I often just skip pressing it altogether. It's going to help us take a little bit of the moisture out, which is going to give a nicer texture to the tofu. But like I said, if you're pressed for time, you can just skip it. Okay, so here I've got my tofu in a little paper towel sandwich, and I'm going to put, I have a cookbook here, same cookbook I'm using for the recipe.
Good idea.
Just put that right on top, and that'll just sit there. It's just sitting like this on the counter. A couple of books would be better, but we're going to use what we have in front of us, and that will get ready. I also promised to share the link. Let me grab that for everybody.
And so while you're putting that up, maybe I'll just talk about tofu for a sec.
Yeah.
So yeah, tofu is a really great source of protein, especially for those that are vegetarians. But even if you're not a vegetarian, even if you just are a person that maybe is trying to reduce your meat intake and for personal reasons or health reasons. And so this is a good source of protein. And also something that I've been thinking about chatting with some of my clients lately, it's also a source of like antioxidants, specifically something called phytolignans. And so there's a little bit of research behind the phytolignans and possibly assisting with supporting menopause. So like in hot flashes, I don't think the research is super strong and 100%, definitive, but I think that there's research behind that. So it's kind of neat I was reading about that recently.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yes.
Always good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, I have shared the link. So this recipe is from her cookbook. So the author's name is Deb Perlman. So you'll notice that the link I shared is not from Deb Perlman's official blog. It's a fan who's made the recipe and reposted the recipe. I looked at it and I believe it is the exact same. They just reposted it. But if you're wondering why the name of the blog doesn't match the name of the cookbook, that would be why. All right, we've got our tofu pressed. So we are now going to turn on our oven. We're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees. There we go. While that's heating up, we are going to get everything else ready to go. Deb, our cookbook author, she said, I love how she writes this. She says, tofu really wants to stick. So what she recommends is actually using 2 different sheet pans, one for the broccoli and one for the tofu. So that for the tofu, you can put parchment paper underneath it. And for the broccoli, you can skip that so that your broccoli gets nice and crispy. So if you have two smaller pans, absolutely line one with parchment paper and one without. I have a very large pan here, so I'm going to do parchment paper on half and do my tofu on that side and put my broccoli on the other side.
That's a great idea for just using one dish, right? Yeah.
Less dishes is always the better option, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got my parchment paper on. Oh, this is another trick. It's going to be a little noisy on Zoom, but this is one I learned from a chef on Instagram. So just a funny little thing. Parchment paper, when you lay it flat, you can see here it doesn't want to lay flat on the pan. So this guy's trick is to crumple it up. So excuse the noise. Make it into a little ball. That's much more willing to lie flat.
Oh, awesome.
I was surprised how helpful that was when I learned it. Okay, now we are going to chop up our broccoli. So my broccoli is a little sad and old here, but again, the spirit of these classes is using it up. Deb, our cookbook author, says do not waste the stems for this recipe. So we can absolutely chop up the stems as well and eat them. We're looking for pieces. Oh, I just lost a guy. About this big.
And you're right, there's lots of fiber in the stem. So yeah, some people might peel the outer part and just get rid of that woody firm part. Some people might not. Yeah. And if I can add in, so something that I do, if I was making this recipe at home today, I might use my frozen broccoli solely because I have a giant bag at home, right? And we're trying to use stuff that we have at home. So you had your sad limp broccoli. I have my frozen old broccoli. And, you know, a lot of people wonder if frozen vegetables are, you know, nutritionally equivalent. And they really are. Sometimes they're even, there's even more nutrients in them because they're, fruits and veg that are picked and flash frozen, they're picked at their peak of ripeness, whereas many, fruits may not be, and then they'll kind of ripen on the truck. So there's a lot of benefits to using frozen fruits and veg. And in this case, if I was doing it for this recipe, what I would do is I would thaw my broccoli and then I would roast it. So I wouldn't put it in the oven frozen, although you probably could, but I would cook it, quickly. Yeah.
That is a great tip, Christina. The other thing, the other benefit I'm thinking of there is then you don't have to chop anything.
Well, that's true. Yes, you're right about that. I've done that for stir fries and saved the chopping because stir fries are laborious.
For sure.
That's right. And sometimes frozen items can be more affordable. Not necessarily. If we're buying in season, then we might get fresh items that are a bit more affordable. But having the frozen broccoli or whatever frozen items you have on hand, it might potentially reduce waste because we're just pulling out what we need when we need it. There might be a cost savings. We've mentioned the nutritional benefits. And it's convenient, as you mentioned, right? So, yeah.
I loved your tip about peeling the broccoli stems. So I have done that.
Yeah.
Especially just because they're a little older and woodier. And I am surprised. I usually just would slice them up whole. I'm surprised how much softer and nicer this seems without the
inside. Yeah,
that's great.
Excellent. And now we have a little bit extra broccoli in our dish, right?
Yes, extra fiber. Okay, so I've got my little pile of broccoli, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it on the side of my pan that does not have parchment paper because we want this to get nice and crispy. Okay, and then we are going to drizzle it with our neutral oil. So this was actually, I thought ahead when I was buying this. I was looking at the long aisle of different oils and thinking, I don't truly understand the difference between different neutral oils. I have this vague idea that vegetable oils may be not as good, or but I don't actually know if that's true. So Christina, could you tell us a little bit about what kind of oils are best to use?
Sure. So you're right that most of those oils are fine. We're looking to, when we consume fats, because we do need fat in our diet and we do need fat to cook food, we just want to choose fats that have a greater percentage of healthy fats within the fat. So when a fat is liquid, like, you know, oil, then it's generally going to be better. But you're right, some of the oils may be a little bit more beneficial. So olive oil is one of the most well-studied oils. And sometimes I wonder a little bit, is it just that it's more well-studied so we know about it? But we do know that there's health benefits in using olive oil. However, it is more costly. So that's something to always think about. And there is a stronger flavor. The neutral oils like sunflower, safflower, corn, canola, all of those really are very similar. I know that we grow canola in Canada, and it's affordable. I don't know where safflower is grown. It's probably grown here too. I don't know. But these generally are going to have more of the mono and polyunsaturated fats. So they're just the healthy fats for our body. We want to limit the saturated fats. And we'll find greater amounts of saturated fats in solids, so like butter, or even something like coconut oil. So we think of it as oil, but it comes in a solid form. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. So you don't need to worry about buying really one over the other.
It's not a big deal. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Okay, the broccoli's good to go. I drizzled our neutral oil over it, as well as salt and pepper. What are we doing next? Okay, tofu. All right, so I'm gonna move the cookbook. I don't think that was 10 minutes, but you know, it's better than nothing.
That's longer than I usually do. I just like the paper towel and that's it, quickly.
Easy one to skip the pressing. Okay, here's my tofu. So my paper towels have absorbed quite a lot of water. That's just water that's coming out of the tofu and leaving the tofu free to absorb flavors. So as I mentioned when I was going through the ingredients, I don't have cornstarch on hand. Christina and I were talking before the recording started about substitutions. So if you were wanting to coat your tofu in something, you could use flour instead. But we are going to just leave it plain today and still a nice crispy exterior. Yeah. So this is another thing. One of my first cookbooks I ever bought was it's called Isa Does It. She's a wonderful vegan chef, and she has a whole chapter called Tofu Butchery, which is so funny. And it's just different ways to slice up your tofu. I always think of that. Wow. So when I'm slicing it, because it's really straightforward. You can't really mess it up. But if you want really nice squares, a tip is to stand it up on its side and go down the middle. That's going to help us get a more perfect cube shape. So now we've got kind of a sandwich, and now I'm going to slice it up like just into a grid. And this is the same for cutting anything. I find the longer, this is not going to be a technical explanation at all, but I find the longer you can kind of keep it in its original shape, the easier it's going to be to slice up. So.
For sure. Like tomatoes and onions are tricky, but yeah, I try and keep it in its original shape if possible.
Yeah. I know I don't do this very often, but for onions, trying to keep the root end on so that it all stays together.
Yes.
Something I've seen professional chefs do.
I think I've heard chefs do that. Yes.
Okay. So I love this. I love slicing tofu. It's so easy to slice. And because we did our little sandwich method, we're getting these perfect cubes. Very satisfying. All right. So if we were using cornstarch or flour, I would have a separate bowl here, and I would put the tofu in, sprinkle the cornstarch on top, and kind of toss to coat. Because, no, sorry, we are still going to do that. I need to get a bowl. One second. Tofu is going into the bowl. Like I said, if we were adding cornstarch or flour, now would be the time. We are going to add a little bit of oil. I have a tablespoon measurement here. Normally I would eyeball this, but this is something where the oil is going to, especially because I'm not using the cornstarch, I don't want to over or underdo it on the oil. So I've got my full tablespoon here of oil. We're also adding soy sauce. What else do we need? We need 1 tablespoon again. Easy peasy. So another a substitution that the recipe author suggests here is tamari. So Christina, please jump in, but my understanding is the difference is tamari is gluten-free. So if you're cooking for someone who's gluten-free, it's a better option to use.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be gluten-free. Like tamari is a type of soy sauce, but it's fermented in a different way. Yeah. And I think my understanding, because I did look this up yesterday to confirm, is it may be a little bit lower in sodium, I think.
Oh, that's good to know too.
Yeah. But I guess really we'd probably have to just verify based on the nutrition facts table. So, but I think it has the potential to be lower in sodium. Yeah. And that's the great thing, you know, of cooking at home and, you know, making this type of dish at home is we have the ability to control the sodium. We're still adding some ingredients that do have salt, but it's very likely less than what industry would add if we bought something pre-made.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I've got my tofu coated with soy sauce and oil. If you're using cornstarch or flour, that would be in here too. Now I'm going to put it onto the parchment paper. Smells lovely. Just think tofu and soy sauce are they're just best friends, you know, they go great together. Okay, and I want to make sure this is in one even layer because I want it to be crispy. We're also going to be flipping it halfway, and that's going to be a lot easier if it's already in one layer. Okay, here's my sheet pan. We've got tofu and broccoli. It's going to go into the oven, which is preheated to 400 degrees. It is going to go in for 20 minutes. So we'll probably sign off before it's time to flip it, but it goes in for 20 minutes, take it out, flip it, and then it goes back in for another 10. So it's going to go in. And I'm going to set a timer. I like this timer better. Timer for 20 minutes. Start. Okay, great. All right, now it's time to make our pesto. So for our pesto, we are going to need either a food processor or a blender. A Magic Bullet is a great option here. The shape of the container works really well. I have, knocking my oil over this cord. I have my food processor here. I know Michelle, who often attends these classes, has a mini food processor that would work wonderfully here as well. Bits and bobs together.
Yeah, I know when I got my food processor or maybe my Ninja blender, I can't remember, it came with a mini one. And at first I was like, what am I going to do with this? But you're right. When you're just making a little sauce, it's really useful for sure.
It's just, again, it's so nice to have less dishes to do.
Yes.
Okay, so we are going to do all of our pesto ingredients. So we're going to start with sesame seeds. It's going to go into a jar later, so I'm just going to rip this bag, wipe this off. So we have 1 tablespoon of sesame seeds. I have a giant bag here. Maybe I'll make some tahini or something later.
Good idea.
Okay, I need 1/4 cup of shelled peanuts. Here's my 1/4 cup peanuts. If I can get this open.
And it's nice because in this recipe, we're getting some of our protein from the tofu, but we're also getting a little bit from our nuts and our seeds, and we're getting some healthy fats from our nuts and our seeds as well. So really good, healthful sources of our nutrients.
And very, very tasty.
Yes, oh, for sure.
Equally important. Okay, so we also have fresh ginger here. Jury's out on, do you need to peel fresh ginger or not? I've heard people say you do. I've heard people say you don't. Christina, do you have a preference either way?
Do you know what? Yeah, I've never like looked that up. I usually do, but if I'm lazy, I sometimes don't. So, and the way that I store my ginger, because I don't use it like all the time, is I store it in the freezer. I don't know if you do the same thing. And then I can grate it into a dish sometimes, and it's really like firm. So I find that's helpful for me. And sometimes because it's frozen, I don't feel like peeling it. So yeah.
Yep. No, so I would say I'm almost always lazy. I don't like it. But one trick, if the skin I don't notice the skin in recipes, especially if it's being grated.
You're right.
Because we're going to chop today, I did want to show a trick for getting it off, which it can be quite difficult just because ginger is such a strange shape. Get the skin off without wasting a lot of it. So there's a trick where you can use a spoon. So I have done it before. Let's see if it'll work today. So I'm basically just going to scrape the skin off with the back of the spoon.
I've seen that trick. I forgot about that trick, but I have seen that.
Look how nicely that came off.
Nice.
So would recommend the spoon trick if you're wanting to peel it. Would also recommend just leaving the skin on. Here, I'm just going to do a rough chop of the ginger instead of taking the time to grate it nicely, just because it is going into a food processor.
Exactly.
A lot of it.
And I want to mention one fun fact that I just thought of as you were talking, because I was talking about the health benefits of the nuts and seeds, and you were like, and it tastes great. Yeah. And you know what? You're right. So studies indicate that the number one reason people choose food is taste. So it's not health, it's not cost, it's not other things. The number one reason is taste. So yeah, we want to make great tasting things that also are healthy if we're thinking about our health, but that taste great, and they can taste great.
That rings true to me for sure. I'm definitely choosing food based on flavor. Okay, so the ginger, like I said, I'm just going to do a rough chop. Oh, I haven't bought fresh ginger in so long. I forgot how lovely it smells. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing about these online classes is we can't all smell the food together, which is, it smells a huge part of taste, right? So
absolutely, you got it.
Okay, so I've just got little ginger slices like this. I'm gonna go on in. I might have to, I'm wondering if I'll need to double this recipe just for the size of my food processor. Oh my gosh, I mean ginger everywhere. But let's see. Okay, now I need 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. As I mentioned, I'm not using garlic today, but if you are using garlic, now would be the time to add 1 clove. It should be peeled, but I don't think it needs to be chopped unless it's a very big one, in which case you could chop it into a couple pieces. So 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. There we go. 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. So sesame oil is a tricky one to substitute just because it is really, really, what's the word? Rich in flavor. Like it has,
flavorful, yeah.
It's got a really kind of unique flavor. If you don't have it, you could just use your neutral oil, but your pesto is just gonna lack a little bit of depth. But if you don't want to go buy it, then you can certainly still make this recipe. Same thing with this rice vinegar, which this is new. Let's see if I can get that open. Rice vinegar, if you have apple cider vinegar, you could use that just to add vinegar taste, or not vinegar taste, but acidity, the word I'm looking for, or lemon juice. Lime juice would be good too. Again, it's not going to taste quite the same. I would recommend buying these if you're at all interested in owning them. But I also know that 2 jars of things for one recipe is a big commitment. So if you're not interested in using these flavors over and over again, then that's where substitutions are a great idea. So 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. And we just need a tiny bit of sugar, just a 1/4 teaspoon. Just this little guy. Okay, so my apologies for the noise. I'm just gonna blend this together and we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I might need to double, but we'll see how far we get. Okay, we got this mostly chopped. I might add even just a little bit more. Ooh, I'm dripping everywhere. It's a messy one. I'm gonna add just a little more sesame seeds. Just because I have lots and lots. And you know what? I'm gonna add a little bit more peanuts as well. It's gonna end up being, my pesto is gonna end up being thicker than the original recipe, but I think that is also gonna help it blend up a little bit smoother, if that makes sense. Lovely. Okay. Where is my, of course, my spatula is going to be dirty. Here we go. So I'm just going to scrape down the sides. This looks wonderful. I'm going to scrape the excess. This is the problem with the food processors. So many pieces, so many nooks and crannies to get the food out of. Okay. Again, I wish we could all smell this because it's not the prettiest, but it smells just heavenly. Give it a little stir. Let me show it off. There's our, okay, can I do this without spilling? There's our pesto. Like I said, it's not the prettiest, but if you could smell it, you wouldn't think twice about its appearance because it smells wonderful. Just garlicky. Sorry, I don't have garlic. If you have garlic, it's gingery and soy sauce and lovely.
That looks really good. And I'm imagining that like ginger scent just coming through with the nuts. Like I'm totally imagining it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So Deb, actually our cookbook author, I'm just remembering this as I look at it. She writes really lovely headers to all her recipes, kind of talking about her inspiration for the dish and what kind of time of her life she's eaten it at. And she talks about being a vegetarian as a young teenager. And I think this recipe is based on a takeout dish that she really loved as a vegetarian teenager. And she used to eat it with noodles, but she found the sauce is so flavorful and the textures of the broccoli and tofu work so well with the sauce that you don't even need noodles. If you were wanting to make this into a little bit of a heartier meal or stretch it, you could absolutely add noodles, but it's lovely as is. So Patricia, unless you have any questions, I think we're close to done. Just for serving, I'm just going to show the photo here. So you're just going to mix the tofu and broccoli together, top with green onions, and then you drizzle the lovely pesto on top. And it is a really tasty meal. And as Christina's let us know, there's lots of great nutrients in there as well.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add in, so you've got like the fiber from the vegetables, you've got the protein from the tofu and the pesto. And then, yeah, as Laura said, if you served it over noodles, that might make it more of a complete meal. Or if you wanted to try something different, I mean, I haven't tried this, but an idea would be a different whole grain. So I'm always trying to promote, I think when we think of grains, we think of, like bread and pasta, like the very basic cereals, we think of the very basic grains. And I think we forgot a lot of the whole or ancient grains where many of our sort of slightly more processed grains come from. So something like, barley or wheat berries, which kind of look like barley. And it's just essentially the wheat kernels. Or farro or rice. So rice is another grain. Rice is a little bit lower in fiber than the first three that I mentioned, but those are often, grains that I might use to put my stir fry on. And this kind of makes me think of a bit of a stir fry with like a thick sauce. That's what it makes me think of. So that's an idea. Or you could have them separate, right? Just, it doesn't have to be on top of it, but as a side dish. So yeah, that would make it a complete meal and lots of fiber in that as well.
Yes, I love the idea of doing barley or farro with this. That would be delicious.
Yeah.
try that one day. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, Christina. It's been so lovely to have your insight and your wisdom. I feel like I've learned so much, so that's great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Laura.
You are so welcome. I thank you. This is great. So I will get this posted for anyone who wasn't able to be here today. It will be on YouTube, and our next class is not next week, but the week after. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. Okay, bye everybody. Have a lovely day.